Welcome to the Deep Fear channel. Watch closely, stay alert, and don't forget to subscribe. Story 1. The Lighthouse at Dead Man's Bay. The storm was merciless. Waves clawed at the hull like hands trying to drag the boat into the deep. Captain Reeve squinted through the rain, clutching the wheel of the Mariner's Hope, a trawler that hadn't seen a port in months. The radar flickered, static hissing like a whisper from beyond. "Reeve," the radio cracked. "You're off course. There's no record of Dead Man's Bay on our charts." The name froze his spine. He hadn't mentioned that place aloud, not since his father disappeared there 20 years ago. The lightning revealed a lighthouse ahead, tall, leaning, its beacon dim and yellow, cutting through the fog like a dying eye. It shouldn't exist. Every map said it had collapsed decades ago. "Drop anchor," Reeve ordered, but his crew of 3 hesitated. The youngest, Dalton, pointed toward the light. "Captain, someone's waving up there." A silhouette moved behind the glass of the lighthouse, beckoning. They rowed ashore in silence. The beach was littered with bones. Fish, gulls, and something larger. At the base of the lighthouse, the door stood open, creaking as if breathing. Inside, the smell of salt and rot clung to the air. "Hello?" Reeve called. "We saw your light," a voice answered from above. "Welcome home, Captain Reeve." He froze. The keeper emerged from the shadows of the staircase, face pale as wax, smile stretched unnaturally wide. "You came back, just like your father promised." Reeve felt his heart pound. "You knew my father?" The keeper nodded, lips trembling into a grin. "Oh yes. He said he'd send you when the tides were right. He couldn't leave until you came." Reeve's lantern flickered. The walls pulsed with wetness, like the lighthouse itself was alive. Dalton screamed. When Reeve turned, his crewmate was gone. Only a slick trail led up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, they found the lantern room, half submerged. Seawater churned inside the glass chamber, yet the structure wasn't breaking. The waves swirled around a figure floating upside down. His father. "Dad?" The corpse's eyes opened, its mouth stretched to form words that didn't sound human. "The sea doesn't forget. It collects." The keeper's laughter filled the tower as water burst from the walls. Reeve tried to flee, but the ocean was inside now, pouring from his own lungs, flooding the room. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him was the keeper's face melting into his father's. When the Mariner's Hope was found adrift weeks later, it was empty. Only the ship's log remained, ending with, "Dead Man's Bay, light still burning, keep away." Story 2. The Siren's Teeth. Fisherman Jonah Pike believed the sea owed him a debt. For years, he'd lost nets, engines, and friends to the stormy Atlantic. So when he caught something that sang beneath his trawler, he thought fortune had finally smiled. It wasn't a fish, it was a woman. Pale, beautiful, hair floating like ink in the water. She wasn't breathing, but she wasn't dead either. He pulled her aboard and locked her in the cold storage, afraid to show the others. Something about her made his stomach twist. That night, the waves went silent. No wind, no gulls, only a soft humming from below deck. By morning, the crew was uneasy. "Captain," his mate Rourke said, "there's something moving in the freezer." Jonah brushed him off, but when he went to check, the ice was melted. The woman was gone. Only bloody handprints streaked across the walls, leading up towards the deck. The humming grew louder. It was beneath their skin. The youngest sailor began to convulse. From his throat, seawater spilled out, and something sharp tore through his gums, pearl-white teeth, long as needles. "Sirens," Rourke whispered. "They plant themselves in your blood." That night, Jonah saw her again, sitting on the edge of the boat, eyes black as the abyss. She smiled, showing those same teeth. "You took me from the deep," she said. "Now I'll take you home." Jonah tried to start the engines, but they wouldn't move. The compass spun uselessly. The sea below began to glow, thousands of pale shapes swimming upward. Not fish, not human, something in between. Rourke screamed as tendrils wrapped around his legs, dragging him below. Jonah grabbed a flare and threw it into the water. For one horrifying moment, he saw the truth. A field of faces singing from the deep, each one wearing the same mouth full of sirens' teeth. He jumped overboard, thinking he could escape. But the ocean wasn't water anymore. It was alive. Hands pulled him down, down, until the pressure crushed his chest. When divers found his trawler months later, it was upright, spotless, like it had just been launched. Inside the captain's chair sat a man with gills cut into his neck, smiling towards the horizon. Story 3. The Ghost Ship Merrow. The Merrow had been lost for 80 years, until now. Cargo ship Everline received a distress signal in the North Atlantic. SS Merrow. Coordinates: need assistance. All souls aboard. The crew was stunned. The ship had vanished in 1945, rumored to have caught fire and sunk. Yet the coordinates matched exactly where sonar detected a drifting vessel. When they approached, the fog grew dense as milk. And there she was, the Merrow, pristine and silent, its decks glistening as if freshly painted. "Should we board her?" the first officer asked. Captain Lyle nodded. "We owe it to the lost." The Merrow was empty, or so they thought. Every corridor smelled faintly of iron and seawater. Dinner plates still sat on tables. Beds looked freshly made. But every clock showed the same time, 2:13 a.m. Down in the engine room, Lyle found something written on the wall in chalk. "Do not let them remember." The radio suddenly came alive. "Captain Lyle," it said in his own voice, "you shouldn't have come." One of his men screamed from the upper deck. When Lyle arrived, he found him staring overboard, face pale. "There's people down there, sir," he whispered. "They look like us." In the water below floated dozens of corpses, each wearing Everline uniforms, his own crew. Lyle tried to send an SOS, but the Everline had vanished. Only fog surrounded them. The ship's logbook, somehow new, appeared on the captain's desk. The last entry was blank, waiting. Footsteps echoed above. When Lyle looked, he saw his own crew, alive, moving. But something was wrong. Their eyes were glazed, mouths mumbling prayers. "The Merrow sails forever," one said in a hollow voice, "to keep the sea from waking." Lightning flashed, and the ocean below pulsed like a heartbeat. As the thunder rolled, the ship began to sink slowly, not into the sea, but into the fog itself, dissolving like paper. Lyle's last note was found years later in a floating bottle. "If you ever hear the Merrow's horn, change course. It's not calling for help, it's calling for you." Story 5. The Cabin Below. In 2013, 4 friends rented a small fishing charter in the Florida Keys. It was cheap, too cheap, But the old man who rented it said the motor still runs, and the seas calm tonight. The boat was called the Cassandra. They laughed at the name until they noticed the scratched-out letters beneath. The Calypso. By sunset, the water had turned unnaturally still. No sound, no wind, only silence, and a faint vibration coming from below deck. One of them, Aaron, went down to check the generator. He didn't come back. They heard 3 slow knocks from the cabin floor. Then Aaron's voice, "Guys, open the hatch!" But when they lifted it, there was no one there. Only a narrow stairway leading deeper than the boat's blueprints should allow. They descended with flashlights. The steps were slick, and the air was wrong, thick, like breathing through water. At the bottom was a single metal door, cold to the touch, with strange marks scratched into it. It began to rattle. When they turned to flee, the door creaked open on its own. A faint light spilled out, flickering. Inside was a cabin, not of the Cassandra, but something older. Brass walls, black and white photos of sailors staring directly at the camera, eyes wide with fear. One of the friends whispered, "We're inside another ship." A voice echoed through the old speaker on the wall. "Return what you took." None of them knew what it meant. Then, one by one, their flashlights flickered out. In the brief moments of light, they saw something crawling from the shadows, wet, boneless, dragging itself closer with a sloshing sound. Its mouth was full of broken teeth, whispering in multiple voices. They ran for the stairs, but the ladder was gone. Only open sea above, shimmering like a window. The last survivor, Leah, tried to swim upward. She broke the surface, only to find herself still inside the cabin. The same rusted walls, the same dripping pipes. The ship's radio crackled to life again. "Thank you for coming back to the Calypso." The Cassandra was found drifting 2 weeks later. The Coast Guard report noted one anomaly. The engine room had expanded by 30 feet, and the cabin below now contained 7 life jackets instead of 4. Story 6. The Tide Eater. The fishing trawler. Saint Alara was found drifting 30 miles off the coast of Maine. No crew aboard, no signs of struggle. The Coast Guard report listed her as intact and operational, though the cabin door had been welded shut from the inside. When salvage diver Mason Holt volunteered to investigate, the captain warned him, "That boat's cursed. We found her once before, back in 1999. She always comes back." Mason didn't believe in curses. He believed in money. He took his partner Rhea and 2 crewmen, Blake and Torres, and set out under a violet dawn. The ocean was a sheet of glass, unnaturally calm. The radio picked up static that seemed to breathe. By noon, they spotted the Saint Alara. She floated perfectly upright, her hull stained with something dark that wasn't rust. "She looks freshly painted," Rhea said. Mason nodded. "That's the weird part. No barnacles, no corrosion, nothing." As they drew closer, Blake pointed towards the deck. "Wait, what's that?" On the bow, written in thick black sludge, were 3 words, "Feed the sea." They boarded cautiously. The deck creaked, but not from rot, more like a sound made by something breathing. The air smelled metallic, like blood and wet iron. The cabin door was welded shut, but someone had carved deep gouges around the edges. Fingernails, by the look of it. Mason pried the door open with a crowbar. The metal gave with a shriek, and a gust of cold air poured out, smelling faintly of brine and decay. The cabin was pristine. Every switch, every gauge looked brand new. But in the corner sat something that didn't belong. A pile of waterlogged journals tied with string. The first page read, July 3rd, 1999. We found it again. The sea won't let it go. Another entry. July 5th. The voices come at high tide. They sound like the ones we lost. Rhea frowned. Who wrote this? Torres turned pale. The original crew, maybe? They disappeared mid-voyage. As night fell, fog rolled in, thick and heavy. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in minutes. The St. Alara's lights flickered to life on their own. Mason tried the radio, but all that came through was a rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. At 2:14 a.m., Blake screamed. They found him on the deck, kneeling by the railing, staring into the black water. His eyes were wide, unblinking. They're down there, he whispered. The ones who drowned? They're asking for help. Mason pulled him back. Snap out of it! But Blake's gaze didn't move. They said they're hungry. A noise echoed from below deck, something heavy sliding across metal. Rhea grabbed a flashlight. There's a lower hatch. Maybe it's just the current. They descended. The lower hold was wrong. The floor was covered in a thin layer of black water, still as glass. When Mason shone his light into it, the reflection didn't show their faces. It showed other faces. Pale, open-mouthed, screaming in silence. Rhea gasped. It's like they're trapped under the surface. Torres stepped back, but his boot broke the water's skin, sending ripples outward. The faces moved. The water boiled. Hands shot up, gripping Torres's leg. He screamed as he was pulled down, vanishing into the floor like it was quicksand. The water went still again. Only his flashlight remained, floating upside down, beam flickering across the ceiling. They ran for the deck, but the stairway seemed longer than before, stretching downward, curving in impossible directions. Rhea shouted, We're not in the same boat anymore. Mason looked back. The St. Alara's corridors were warping, metal groaning as if the ship were breathing. Walls pulsed. The lights beat in rhythm with the ocean's heartbeat outside. They reached the deck. The fog was thicker now, glowing faintly blue. In the mist, shapes moved, not fish, not birds. They were silhouettes of people walking slowly across the water toward the boat. Rhea whispered, Those are the crew. The shapes climbed aboard. Their skin was bloated, gray, their mouths open and dripping seawater. Blake stumbled back. No, no, you're dead! You're all dead! One of them reached for him, not attacking, just touching his cheek, leaving a trail of black ooze. Blake began to convulse. The color drained from his face. Then he smiled. In a voice that wasn't his, he said, The sea forgives. The sea remembers. And he stepped backward into the water, disappearing without a splash. Rhea found one last journal page near the helm. The tide is alive. It eats the forgotten. The boat is its mouth. Once you board, you feed it. Mason realized what it meant. The Alara wasn't a ship anymore. It was a living organism, feeding on memories, on lives, dragging them into the tide where time didn't exist. He tried to start their own skiff's engine, but the ignition just clicked. From the fog, a voice called his name. Not Rhea's, not anyone human. Mason. He turned. His younger brother, dead for 6 years, stood on the deck of the Elara, smiling. His eyes were glassy, his skin translucent. "You left me," the figure said softly. "Come below. The tide's waiting." Mason's hands trembled. "You're not real." Rhea grabbed his shoulder. "Don't listen! It's copying him!" The figure stepped closer, dripping black water. "The tide forgives." The deck began to warp beneath them. The board split open, revealing the same black liquid pulsing underneath. It rose, climbing their boots, reaching their knees, their waists. Rhea screamed as something pulled her under. Dozens of hands, pale and cold. She vanished in seconds. Mason struggled, pulling free. He climbed the mast, clutching the rigging as the entire ship sank into itself, folding like flesh. Below, the water opened an eye, massive, yellow, watching him. Then the Elara spoke, not through sound, but vibration, through every drop of water around him. "Feed me memory," Mason screamed into the wind. "You can't have me!" He cut the rope, holding the emergency flare, and lit it. The crimson glow filled the fog, painting the ship in blood-red light. The water hissed. The eye flinched. He threw the flare into the black pool. The ocean erupted. A sound like thunder mixed with screaming filled the air. The Saint Elara tore itself apart, pieces of wood and steel flying into the night. Mason jumped into the sea. The shock of freezing water stole his breath. He swam until dawn. A cargo freighter found Mason clinging to a lifebuoy 2 days later. He was half delirious, muttering about the eye beneath the tide. When questioned, he insisted the Saint Elara was gone, swallowed whole by the ocean. The Coast Guard searched the coordinates for weeks. Nothing. Until the 3rd week. A distress call came through on an old radio frequency. "This is Saint Elara, requesting assistance." The signal was traced to the exact spot where Mason had been rescued. The next morning, fishermen reported seeing a boat drifting near the coast. White hull, black letters, STELARA. When they boarded, the deck was empty, except for a single flare gun, rusted and burnt, and a message scrawled across the wheelhouse in salt. "The sea never forgets." Weeks later, Mason sat in a hospital overlooking the Atlantic. Every night, he heard waves lapping the shore. Every night, they whispered his name. He began to see faces in puddles, in rainwater, in mirrors after a shower. Rhea, Blake, Torres, all smiling, all mouthing the same phrase, "It's almost high tide." One morning, the nurses found his bed empty, the window open, footprints leading to the shore. On the rocks below, they found a single boot, soaked in black water. That night, the fog rolled in thicker than ever, and out at sea, a faint light blinked, like a beacon or an eye-opening. The Coast Guard logged another transmission hours later. It lasted only 6 seconds, but the voice was clear. "The tide is hungry again."
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe.